Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 2 of the Light of Darkness podcast. I'm your host, Derrick Garza, and we're here for another edition of this exciting new podcast called The Light of Darkness. Did I say that already?
The Light of Darkness, yes.
You got to talk into the mic.
Into the microphone. Here I am.
Today, on my second episode, my guest is going to be, is actually not is going to be, you're here.
I'm here currently.
Very good friend of mine that I've known for quite some time. One of my favorite weirdos, Jeremy Landry. What's up, man?
Not much, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, brother. How you doing, man? I'm not even giving you a chance to answer that question. I'm just moving right along.
I feel good. I feel a little beat up, after class today.
Don't look at my show notes.
Don't look at the notes.
That's
okay. I'm trying to get ahead of you here.
That's cheating.
No, I feel great. It's a good day. I had some lunch with another friend of ours right before this to kind of prepare myself and get my stomach full and level my head out a little bit.
What was your preparation like? Were you nervous coming into this thing?
Yeah. When you asked me earlier if I was ready to talk, I really just wanted to be like, no, and run away.
Well, I'm glad you did it, man. I'm glad that you stuck with it, that you saw this task all the way through to the end.
Indeed.
Jeremy Landry is one of my friends that I've met through jiu-jitsu, and a really interesting dude, man. I've known you for probably about 4 years now.
Yep.
And my first interaction with Jeremy was a very, very strange one, actually. So I'm new to this gym teaching, and kind of randomly this guy shows up, and homeboy has his hair on the side, like he took the clippers and just basically like landscaped just the clippers right through, right to the top. No fade. Didn't get the rest of it. It's just like on both sides, just up. And so I see this guy, and I don't know what to think about him because I think this dude might fucking be crazy. He might be crazy. And so he's like just very, very level head. I was not expecting. I was expecting just kind of an insane person. And I didn't get that. I was like, I got a common greeting of "What's up, man? How's it going? I'm trying this new gym out, blah blah blah." And I was like, "Oh, he just has weird fucking taste in haircuts."
I used to call it the negative sideburn.
What prompted the negative sideburn?
Boredom and alcohol, most likely.
Yeah. So that turned into just normal haircut eventually, and then he just became one of my students, and wanted to learn jiu-jitsu, man.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about where you're from and stuff, man.
I was born and raised in Louisiana, a little town called Coteau, which no one in the
Koto
Coteau.
I was way the fuck up.
Yeah,
I did not. Yeah, so, you can tell I haven't looked at many maps of Louisiana.
There's not much to see. And it's eroding quickly every day, so it might disappear.
The city
one of
or
these days.
the
the
whole
state overall, coastal preservation is a big thing in Louisiana, and that's a whole nother topic. That's a totally different type of podcast. But
is it though?
It's sort of.
It could be this podcast.
I'm not educated enough on all the.
That's why it could be this podcast. We have very uneducated opinions and fake news and facts, and does it. Yeah, man, we could just go with it. We can make shit up as we go along.
Yeah, I was born in this little small community, and growing up there, I had to tell people that I was from the next largest town, and then once I moved away from there, I had to tell people that I was from the even next larger town.
So what is the next largest?
It's a city called New Iberia in Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
And then, moving out of Louisiana, whenever you tell someone that you're from New Iberia, Louisiana, they look at you like you're crazy. So you have to say Lafayette. And most people know where Lafayette is because if you look at a map, it's on I-10, and it's actually a college town, and it's big enough that they actually put the name in bold letters. So it gives you some point of reference as to where I'm from in Louisiana. And it's just, south of I-10 in Louisiana is where I reign from, so to speak.
I visited Louisiana a couple of months ago.
New Orleans, right?
I went to New Orleans, and it's interesting, man, because it feels a lot older than where we're at here. We're in Austin, Texas,
for sure.
And but it has a way different culture. It's kind of it's got like a darker kind of murderish culture. And before I went, so my biggest, I guess, influence to what I know Louisiana about is the first 48, because there's so many murders.
Right.
And it's just like, I love that show. It's a great show. And but that's what I know Louisiana. And No Limit.
No Limit Soldiers.
Yeah, No Limit. So I wasn't knowing quite what to expect. Oh, and True Blood. I gotta say that. I gotta say True Blood. Even though it's kind of a, I guess, I don't know if it's a caricature of the culture there.
I think it's just a series that was filmed in a place and then enacted by people who had really bad ideas of what the accent was supposed to sound like.
So it's a caricature. It's a caricature. So I went there, and the thing that, again, that stood out to me was the how ingrained the death and murder and, I mean, all that type of, I don't know, environment or vibe was in the culture.
Yeah, New Orleans has long had a history and a link to, you know, voodoo and black magic and stuff like that, and you know, the crazy cemeteries there. It being New Orleans itself being below sea level, all of the cemeteries have to be above ground, and that's how you get those huge, I don't even know the correct term for them, but it's above ground burial sites.
Yeah, we went on some burial tours, some funeral, I think those are called funeral tours. Excuse me. Sorry, man. Human nature. And we got like a kind of a, I guess, a behind the scenes of, I don't want to say behind the scenes, man. Life is not a scene, but how the funeral, how the cemeteries work. So there's for a lot of the cemeteries there's like little stone houses, and so they'll put remains in there, and it gets so hot during the summers that essentially it cremates them. I mean, I'm giving a very crude retelling of what was told to me,
right?
But this happened because I guess they used to bury them up the river, and when it would flood, bodies would come down the river, and people wouldn't be super happy about that. Obviously, see their loved ones floating
Jimmy
by. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to deal with that too much where we're here. You know?
No.
So went there, and we just got a good. It was a fun trip, and it was pretty enlightening to see how a lot of other cultures do not embrace death, as far as like they don't celebrate it. They embrace it, I'm sure, but it's a celebration almost of a very real thing that happens in everybody's life.
Right. I think you find that in a lot of other cultures outside of the typical American culture. And New Orleans being a huge port city, you know, there are people from all over that inhabit the place, you know, since its inception, I would assume, that have come from different countries, and that's part of the thing that I think gives New Orleans its European sort of feel. And you know, you get people from different religious backgrounds practicing whatever it is that they may be into. A lot of those different religious sects and people from those cultures do embrace death as part of life. You know, well, it's a celebratory thing.
It was a French colony, because was it not? So I mean that's going to be playing also a big part in
colonized by the French, but you know, they brought. I wasn't alive then, and I'm no history buff, but I could only imagine that there were plenty of slaves that were brought into the States through that port city, you know, and then you have the Africans that practiced different types of religions and stuff. I've read up on it a little bit, and just to kind of satisfy my own curiosity. And a lot of those, like I was saying, a lot of those cultures do celebrate death, and I think that stuff has been ingrained in the culture of that city for centuries.
Yeah, it was explained to me that voodoo is actually not just like this witchcraft that people, I guess, put on their enemies or whatever. It's actually like a religion, correct?
Yeah, it's like the dark side of a different Christian practice, I believe, is really what it is.
It's a Christian practice?
I think that's where it stems from.
Interesting.
Same with a lot of there's a lot of the same sort of practices in some of the Brazilian cultures in religions that I studied up on a little bit, and for the life of me can't remember any of the names of right now, but they kind of have some of the same thing. It's like, the people who abide by the law and practice and worship whoever it is that they worship, and then you have the rest of the community who may be criminal minded or something, or for lack of better words, criminal minded, but the darker side of things of any culture, and they take from it what they want and practice essentially the same things, but just with the darker undertone. I think.
Essentially an evolution, if you will, or a derivative of the established norm.
Yeah, and you find it a lot in Spanish cultures too. We celebrate Dia de los Muertos, and it's kind of the same.
There's always a big fucking deal about that day, right?
Yeah.
Like people are up in arms on the internet, like you're not supposed to celebrate that.
Yeah, but I mean, they do, and why wouldn't you? I think celebrating death is a beautiful thing. If my loved ones die, of course, you're gonna be sad and upset about it to a certain extent, but that they're freed from the bounds of this world that we live in, which I think is there's probably a much more poetic way to say that, but
I mean, it sounds poetic enough.
I think it's a beautiful thing, like they don't have to deal with the day-to-day stress of being confined by their human bodies anymore.
Interesting. I think that if in America, maybe I'm missing it, but in America, I don't think it's emphasized enough, I guess, the idea of dealing with death. So I think that what happens because of that is that people aren't equipped. So people don't know the gravity of the situation. Like, you're going to die. But I feel like, and I could be wrong, so please correct me if I am, but I feel like because of the age that we're in, it's almost like people think they can go and do whatever, and they're going to get a retry. They're going to get a respawn, if you will. Almost like the video game idea, right? Like, yeah, you die, but I see you on the other side. You get another try, but you don't. That we know of.
Sure.
I don't know. I'm just saying, like,
I mean, that's I've definitely heard that argument, life after death, and then maybe reincarnation as some other type of being in another life. And I, to a certain extent, believe in that stuff, and who's to say we aren't living a reincarnated life currently,
I mean, it's a whole thing that we don't have any, any proof or anything to disprove.
Well,
what we do know, I don't mean to cut you off, but what we do know is that we're here now.
We're here now, correct. We're here now, and I believe 100% that science is what everybody should believe in. Because
that could be.
No matter if you think it's, no matter whether or not you believe in it or not, science is real.
Science is real.
Science is real.
I mean, I don't know. Well, for one, I didn't pay attention much in school, but it was one of my favorite subjects. Science in general, figuring shit out, how shit works, the scientific method, hypotheses.
Right.
I learned about that. I did pay attention to those things.
Right. And I mean, science still can't tell us whether or not there is a such thing as life after death, but in a scientific sense, you are buried in the ground and are cremated, and your remains are of a certain chemical composition that go back into the earth, and if you will, the life cycle continues that way. You feed a plant or an animal or an insect, and if you think about it, your very being and that chemical makeup of you gets put back into the earth and brought into life again. So scientifically,
circle of life.
Yeah, scientifically there is life after death.
Disney had it right. So that being said, I wish, if I could have a wish, that we knew if there was or was not. I think it would simplify some things. Number one, like, you could lose somebody and be like, oh, you know what? I have to email through the Ouija board my long lost uncle or whatever. I think it would save a lot on some heartache is all I'm saying.
Yeah, perhaps.
But since there's not, and all we know is that there is today, we should make the most of it.
Absolutely.
That's my only fucking preachy thing that I want to say today.
Do whatever you got to do. Just make it count.
Just make it count.
Just to make it count.
So, man, you've been. I met you through, of course, like so many other people that I've met through jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And you've been doing jiu-jitsu for how long now?
It's coming up on 4 years, I think.
And how has it changed, Jeremy Landry?
I honestly have to say it's changed me drastically. It's given me a lot of the tools that I use in my day-to-day life to reason with unreasonable people, just reason in general.
So I would just say, I'm got to be honest with you, man. When I met you, fucking cool dude, but you might have been one of those unreasonable people.
I was probably highly unreasonable whenever we first met.
It's not that you weren't like a cool dude. You've always been super cool, super nice to me. I don't even like saying the word cool. You've been really nice and open. However, I also did realize that like you were quicker to fly off the handle without ingraining the jiu-jitsu, without having that in your life. And as I've seen you progress our friendship and through you and this art, I've seen you kind of take a more calm approach to a lot of different things.
I've never had any real structure in my life other than, I guess, my parents taught me right from wrong. And then I kind of took that and molded it into what I believed to be true. And, I never really had anything that told me I could be anything more than what I already was. And I think whenever we met in my life, I was probably 30, 31 years old, and I didn't have a whole lot of direction. I knew that I was capable of doing things, and, I had hobbies, and I've always been the type of person that if I get interested in something, I really nerd out on it, and I'll study it, and I try to figure it out, and I try to get good at it. But I also have the problem of like, once I learn enough of a given thing, I kind of lose interest sometimes, and it gets boring. And with jiu-jitsu, it's like an endless puzzle, and there's never. I feel like I get to hang out with you on a weekly basis. Sometimes every day. I see you every day a week, and you're a black belt, and you talk to me about how much. So just so everybody out there knows. And you talk to me about how much, you still learn and how much of a learning process it is. And I think that's one of the coolest things about it is that, on a day-to-day basis, I can go into the gym. Like today, for example, like I totally didn't want to be there and nothing was clicking. Like I know things at this point that I'm supposed to be doing, but I was just kind of sitting there like a bump on a log and letting all of the other guys just kind of like pass my guard and do whatever they wanted. And every now and then I'd have a little spark where I'd be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and like wake up into it. And then other days I show up and I feel like I'm on fire. I feel like, where are they? Bring them to me.
That sounds like a parallel to how most people's days are.
Yeah, true. Some days you just don't want to do it, and sometimes it's effortless and you can succeed at anything. But one of these really cliche like motivational things that I've been reciting in my head for years now is something along the lines of, the most successful people in the world are the ones who wake up and do all the things that no one else wants to do, all the shittiest things that you could possibly think of when you wake up in the morning and go, I don't want to go outside and take care of, whatever animals I have around the house. I don't do that. My girlfriend does that. I basically live on
Well, we're going to get to that for sure. I want to talk about that.
But that's one of the things that comes up in my life, like I don't want to get up and do this, or I don't want to get up and do that. Or, I have this other hobby that I'm really excited to talk to you about on this podcast too, that some days it's all I can think about. I skip going to jiu-jitsu to practice this other hobby. And then other days, recently, even for like a 2-week time span, I didn't set foot into my workspace to try to progress at this art form at all. And, I think that's a general thing that most people encounter in life. But the thing that jiu-jitsu has given me is the ability to recognize the need for discipline in order to achieve whatever your goals may be.
But it also sounds to me like motivation.
Absolutely.
But motivation, just like for the one particular thing, the art of jiu-jitsu, understanding how to be motivated, understanding process, has translated into other things. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And just to touch back on what I was saying previously to that, like I told, some of our teammates and training partners this recently in a conversation too, like if you're ever lacking the motivation to get up and go to the gym in the morning, and by morning we call morning noon.
That is actually, look, let me do my thing. Okay. I'm not trying to wake up at fucking 7 a.m. and be in traffic and be behind a desk. That's fine. If that's what you want to do. If that's what you want to do, if that's what you have to do, cool. Just let me do my thing. I'm not trying to be.
So I think
corporate guy.
I think the lack of motivation sometimes that people face in life, and whether it be you train a martial art or you're an entrepreneur or whatever it is that you face in life, and you quite obviously sometimes have a lack of motivation. What it boils down to is discipline. If you're questioning why you don't have the motivation to succeed in a certain realm of your life, you have to take a step back and look at your dedication to what it is that you're doing. And by dedication, I mean exactly what I said previously is you have to do all the things you don't want to do. You have to put in, I'm never going to, maybe I will, it'll take a long time, but I've been going to the gym for the past month, like 1 day, 2 days a week. It's going to take me a really long time to progress that way, progress that
is
way.
It
maybe.
No, it is.
It will probably
it will,
more than likely.
But it's also priorities. You can't just be I have to do this one thing and forget everything else. Like you have to prioritize things, and some days you're going to be able to spend more time in your workshop of your hobby or whatever, and other days you need to step away from that. I mean, I also wake up sometimes pretty fucking beat up from just doing what we do, rolling around on the floor, having strong technical people try to mangle my limbs.
Yeah.
And there's some days I wake up and I love my job, absolutely love my job, but there's some days where I'm like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go feel that uncomfortable feeling again of, man, it hurts to walk. It hurts to stand upright. My back hurts. My fingers hurt.
But you get up and do it.
I do. Well, I got bills to pay.
That's, that's discipline though.
It is.
The discipline is what keeps people motivated, I think, and
necessity also. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've been trying to drill that into my head as much as possible. Like, today I woke up at like 7 a.m., which is very unlike me. And even my girlfriend was like, what are you doing up so early? And I was like, trying not to repeat another one of those days when I just lounge around and do absolutely nothing. And then at the end of the day, realize that was a wasted day. Like
sometimes that needs to happen though. Sometimes that needs to happen. I understand the being on fire idea, but there's some days where you gotta rein it in. You can't let the fucking the stallions out to pasture. You gotta let them you need to rest today.
I feel like that is a very true statement, but I also feel like, I guess depending on each individual's circumstances, like I have huge aspirations to become self-employed someday with this particular hobby that we haven't quite gotten into yet. And for me, I agree. Maybe I do need a day of rest or, a break from the monotony of my schedule and the dedication that I have to it. But I think I'm the type of person that I'm going to have to like get a pen and a pad down and write it out and like schedule myself a day off.
Shit's hard for me, man.
It is.
That's very difficult for me. I'm not, that's not my strong suit to open up Google calendars and be like, I'm scheduled for a 1 p.m. private today. And from 4 to 5:30, I'm going to be working on the podcast or working on Dark Clan stuff.
Right.
I'm kind of fly by the seat of my pants kind of dude. It's like, I'm impulsive, but that has its drawbacks, obviously,
right.
And that comes from being the dude that wakes up at noon to go to work. I mean, not wake up at noon, to go to work that works at noon.
Right.
I don't wake up at noon. That would be fun, but I don't do it. I don't do it. So just before we move on a little bit, I kind of want to backtrack just a little bit, right? So we talked about New Orleans, right?
Uh-huh.
And you had a story that you wanted to kind of get into about, I guess, the first time that you visited New Orleans.
It was a story that I remember telling you at one point in time. I don't think it was one of the first times that I visited, and It's
Just broke my pen.
It's a very old story, man. This must have happened to me when I was like, this had to be 15, 16 years ago.
How old were you?
I'm 35 now. So, I mean, I think I was 16 or 15 or 16 years old whenever this incident took place. And basically what it was is that, I had a group of friends in high school or, whatever that I hung out with. And there was these parties that we would go to in New Orleans. They were raves, essentially. We were really into, and I still am, for a huge part. Like, people often mistake me for like a hardcore kid because of my appearance and the tattoos and whatever. But like, I'm really an electronic music geek. Like, I love house music and stuff created by computers and people on computers. Like,
I do it all day. I love freestyle all day.
I mean, I love all kinds of music, but deep down inside, I'm an electronic music nerd. And what got me into that was whenever we were really young, 15, 16, I would tell my parents, and I doubt my mom and dad would ever listen to this podcast, but who cares if they did? I'm an adult now. Whenever I was,
we could block. I think we could block. There's ways to block them, right?
Block my parents.
Yeah. You can. When we repost. when we repost this on Facebook, we just exclude them from seeing this post.
So we would go.
Privacy settings.
I would tell my parents that we were going camping in some state park that was kind of, even for kids of that age, it was kind of like far away for us to be venturing out on our own. But my parents have always been really cool with me the entire time I was growing up, and they kind of let me do whatever I want. They knew I wasn't a dumb kid.
Your parents together? Yeah,
still together, or at least I guess they hoped I wasn't an idiot, and this story might prove otherwise. But
probably
we would go to New Orleans. We would drive to New Orleans, and we would go to these raves at this place called the State Palace Theater, and it was a really exquisitely beautiful building. And I could imagine that at one point in time there were, perhaps operas or like really beautiful musical performances in this place. And, certain days of the month and whatnot, it would be overtaken by this promotion that would bring in all these world-class DJs from all over the place, and they would throw raves, crazy drug-induced raves. And I went many times, and one of the times that stands out in my mind the most, I got left behind by my group. I was left in New Orleans.
And how did that happen? Had they just were you not in a certain spot when that happened, or they just like, yo, we had too much to drink?
I think we got separated somehow.
This is before cell phones, or the beepers.
I think. No, it wasn't. It wasn't before cell phones, but I don't think I had a cell phone, because I remember whenever it finally came down to it, I had to use a payphone to call my father to come and pick me up for 3.5, 4 hours away from home. And I don't even think he even really asked me, like, what are you doing in New Orleans? He was like, well, why didn't you call me sooner?
That's a good papa.
Yeah.
It's a good papa.
But the story that I told Derrick about the day or two that ensued after I realized I was left behind is
now keep in mind you're 15 years ago, so you're like a teenager.
I was a teenager. I can't have
y'all just chill.
Horrible
I know
reference for time and whatnot, but I was a young kid, and New Orleans it always struck me as one of those cities that I could get away with whatever I wanted to do there, and it to a great extent probably is. Hence the reason why there is that feeling of like it's dark and murdery and
because
all
it's
that,
murdery
because
and dark.
People get away with all of that stuff there pretty regularly, including the NOPD.
Dang,
that's a different
political right there.
That's a different story. Those guys are the biggest. Those guys are truly gang members out there.
All right,
in my opinion, but
I don't have enough to comment either way.
True, and I mean I probably don't either. But there's you can watch documentaries about it, and those guys were corrupt for a really long time. But anyway, regardless, my story goes, I realized I got left behind. I'm wandering the streets of New Orleans as a 15, 16-year-old kid, and I realized I only have, maybe $40, $50 to my name, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get back home. And I knew that a bus ticket cost more than $50 to get to where I needed to go. So I'm walking down the street and I see these guys playing that 3-card Monte game where, you know, there's like it wasn't even cards. It was like cups with a peanut underneath it or a ball or something like that. And they shuffle them around and you got to pick. So I placed my bet.
You haven't seen enough movies.
At this point in my life, probably not. Then or now, I have not seen enough movies to know that was a setup. But so I played the game. I bet my money. I got set up, and my entire world came crashing down on me as I realized that there were like multiple people in on it, and they had swindled me, and there was really nothing I could do because I was a kid, and these were grown men, and you know they're. Obviously, I didn't know this then, but now I realize that
lunch money.
That was their job. They were out there
money.
Hustling people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I kicked rocks and got all butthurt about it and went and walked down the street, and it was like, you know, dark coming up on nighttime, and I was freaking out and I didn't know what to do, and I'm hiding in this like little.
So you have no place to go.
Nowhere to go.
You have no friends there.
No friends there anymore.
And you don't have any money.
No money. That I just lost at gambling, and you know everything in my mind tells me that I'm either going to be murdered by the time the sun comes up.
Makes sense.
Or no one's ever going to find me, and I'm going to be a homeless kid on the street in New Orleans. Those I felt like were my options at the point in time. So I'm hiding in this little like cutty. I'm on a street, but I'm like hiding in this little spot where people are walking by. And the only thought that could go through my mind, and the only thought that was going through my mind at that time was, I got to get money so that I can get out of here. And I grabbed this old man as he was passing by and basically had every intention of like strong arming him and telling him, you know, give me your money. And I did. I let the guy go.
Well, what was his reaction?
He was like, ooh.
That's
like,
that's a good fucking reaction.
That's my old man, scared old man impression. And,
I mean,
you know, I realized the entire time I knew what I was doing was wrong, but faced with the circumstances and my lack of reasoning and really knowing how the world works, I thought I was going to rob this guy and take his money and buy myself a bus ticket home.
What happened?
I let the guy go.
What made you let him go?
I probably then and now don't possess the capability to rob a person. I don't think it's something that's ingrained in me. You know, it goes back to whenever I said earlier, I guess my parents taught me right from wrong, and however
you were just testing some boundaries, that's all.
Yeah, trying to see, you know, that was the moment in my life where I could have been I could have made the choice to become a career criminal or not. And I think
it's an early age.
Maybe I made the right choice.
You did. I think, well, I don't know. You know what? I can't say you did or did not, but I can say you probably saved yourself a bunch of headache and heartache.
True. Did I tell you there was another tidbit like right before that happened?
Like the same day or
minutes before I decided I was going to grab this old man and try to strong arm him. There was another guy, you know, African American descent probably, that came stumbling down the sidewalk holding his side, and he was going, I've been shot. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to get shot too. Like, where are the bullets coming from? And I think that's one of the things that might have prompted me to be like, well, I got to act now or else I'm done.
So it was a desperation move.
Yeah, I was desperate to get out of there. And then I resorted to panhandling to get some change to call my dad on the payphone to come get my sorry ass.
And he was cool with it.
Yeah, he was totally cool with it.
Fucking great. It worked out great.
My dad has saved my ass a couple times in my life in similar situations.
Well, the benefit of having good parents, man.
True.
The benefit of having good parents. So that brings you to Austin. You've done jiu-jitsu. You've grown in the span of the time that I've known you. Mm-hmm. And so kind of brings me up to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, man. You have a new venture.
Yeah, I got...
well, how did this come about?
So I cooked for a long time. Whenever I first moved to Austin,
I can't hear that without thinking of Breaking Bad and cooked.
Yeah,
is meth,
no.
But we're not talking about
I prepared food for people. Food, not meth.
Well, it's addictive sometimes.
True. Whenever I first moved to Austin, I had some experience. I went to a vocational technical school, if you will, whenever I was like 18. I left when I was 18. I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I went to Motorcycle Mechanics Institute out there. Still owe crazy amounts of money to my student loans to those guys. Never really stuck with it. And, moved to Austin without any real idea of what I was capable of doing or any real skills. And I lied through my teeth to get a job cooking in a restaurant. I got a gig working at this place. I'm not going to name it, but I have a lot of respect for the chef that was there because he sat me down and interviewed me, and I had read the CIA cookbook, and there's a French one that I read, and I and like I said, you get me interested in something and I can study stuff pretty quickly.
So you have kind of an obsessive personality.
Yeah, totally. And I retain information well, and so I was able to go into this interview and talk the talk. And then I was given a job.
What was the interview for? What was the position for?
I was going to be a saute cook in a fine dining establishment on the west side of downtown Austin on 6th Street. The place was really popular whenever it first opened. It was owned by a movie star that, like I said, I don't want to name any names, and I don't know why. I just feel cool saying that.
Yeah,
I don't want to name any names.
I mean, that sounds like some people that you don't want to fuck them up.
But so I was able to talk the talk, and the guy gave me a job, and then 2 days later I show up for the first day, and was not able to walk the walk as well. I was able as well as I was able to.
You're a bullshitter.
Yeah,
is what you are.
I was really good at bullshitting, and I probably still am.
No, you are.
I try not to use it to my advantage anymore, but because I realized
that's Sith Lord shit. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Being a bullshitter is being a manipulator. No, I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying you have the dark arts within you.
I can manipulate, be manipulative.
Game recognized game.
If I have to be a fast talker, I think it's something that I don't know where it came from or how I possess it. And I think it's just because I am able to retain mostly random facts and useless information. I had an older cousin whenever we were much younger. He's older than me. Whenever we were younger, he came up to me one day and he was like, "You're like a walking Reader's Digest. You know a little bit about everything, but you don't really know shit." And
you're an ENTP, correct?
Yes.
I know this because if we were going to abide by the Myers-Briggs profile persona,
right?
ENTP is a bunch of useless information.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
It helps me sometimes. Other times, I just find myself.
It helps you to be, if nothing else, just fucking charming.
Yeah.
Gets you nowhere.
It either helps or I'm faced with a bunch of really deadpan looks from people.
Yeah. It would get you far in an industry or an environment where it's not what you know, it's who you know.
True. And that's a lot of what I think cooking in restaurants is about in a growing culinary scene like Austin is. It's not New York, it's not Chicago, it's not, Paris, France or anything like that. But, if you know the right people, you can get a job in any of the nicer restaurants in town, and especially if you have a little bit of skill or know how to talk the talk. And that experience is what brought me to my hobby. I did good in that job. The first day, the chef that hired me, he came to me and he was like, "All right, it's obvious you were bullshitting me." And I was like, "Yeah, how can you tell?" And he's like, "Because
you suck."
He's like,
"You suck at the job."
It would never take anyone who knows what they're doing 45 minutes to cut to brunoise a 9-pan of shallots. And
would you please explain that brunoise 9-pan of shallots?
It's a technique. A ninth pan is the smallest little container that you can have on a line in a kitchen for your mise en place. Mise en place means everything in place. All of the little things that you have to have in order to perform your job that you go in and you prep beforehand. And brunoise is just a particular cut. It's very small dice, if you will, and they're supposed to be uniformly square, and there's a technique and, you know, everything. And I was just in there like mashing with my knife and basically
it makes sense.
creating shallot pulp, and it took me forever. And it, in hindsight, and, you know, not too long after I was shown how to do it properly and practiced, it would take me 10 minutes to cut that many shallots and fill up that little pan, you know. But the first day I went in there and it took me 45 minutes to an hour. And I thought for sure the guy was going to fire me. And he had a really raspy voice, and I'm not going to try to imitate it, but he was like, you know, I commend you on your bullshitting and making me believe that you knew what you were doing.
Words to you?
Yeah. He's like, I respect that. And I can tell you want to do this. So he gave me a chance, and the guy taught me a lot of stuff, and, you know, it enabled me to excel in that job. And, you know, I was there for probably about a year before I moved on. And in that year's time, I got to work every station. You know, I was never, you know, promoted to like a lead line cook or anything that people try to.
But it's experience.
Yeah, it was a good experience. And the guy taught me a lot of stuff. And, you know, since I was able to talk to him about all of the stuff that I had read in the books, he was like, so you know what this is, and you understand it, you know, conceptually, like, let me show you how to do it now. And so, like, I learned a lot of this stuff, and I really became addicted to, everybody had their own, in this kitchen anyway, and I realized it's not a common thing after I worked there, but in this kitchen, all of the cooks had their own knife rolls, and it was just sort of magical to see them open up these rolls, and there'd be like 10,
so we're talking about a container or a pouch, if you will.
A pouch that, you know, folds over. It opens up, and then it has a flap that folds over the blades, and then you literally roll it up and strap it together, and that's how you carry your knives around. And it was just a magical thing for me to see all of these guys that I looked up to in this kitchen, who I thought were like you know, culinary superheroes, for a lack of better words. But it was just cool to see them open up their knife rolls and see all these knives. So I became really fascinated with knives at that point. I think I had always had a fascination with knives because I discovered a collection of little, you know, novelty knives, and this little dagger and all these other things that I had from whenever I was a kid that my parents, I think, seized from me at some point because I was probably displaying some sort of erratic behavior and stabbing my pillow or something. I don't know. And my parents probably were like, you don't need these knives. But I discovered them later on in life.
I do need these knives.
Yeah, they're vital tools to the existence of
what you're about to do, or what you're doing.
Of what I'm doing, and also in general, you know, knives are a critical thing in history and, you know,
and humankind.
Yeah.
It's a tool that has been around, and is as important as the wheel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm fucking around, but
probably.
I mean, we're not science buffs and history buffs, and we did mention that, but it seems logical.
Yeah, you know, there's been wars won with swords and, you know, bayonets, and great people have died by the sword, and, you know, all that stuff is true. And I'd love to do a history podcast and brush up on some of that and figure it out, and like
for another time,
really get in depth with that kind of stuff. But that fascination with knives through cooking, I cooked from probably about 2005 to probably about 2014, I would say. And you know, gathered my own little collection of kitchen knives, and, you know, I have one or two that are what I consider fancier knives, and then I have some that are more economy. And
so I've known you 4 years,
mm-hmm.
and in the span of 4 years, I've seen a progression, which has brought you to what you're doing now. You are now actually producing knives.
Yeah, I'm a
What's
amateur
the proper
amateur knife maker, if you will. You know, I don't want to call myself a bladesmith. That I think that's held in more high regard. Like, you know, that would be like me. You know, I'm not a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I'm not a bladesmith. I haven't gotten that far yet.
Who's gonna promote you? Do you promote yourself? It's
Well,
tricky.
that's funny. I guess there would be a certain point in my career doing this where I could, maybe be more comfortable with saying, I'm not an amateur or a novice anymore. But there are some societies, the American Bladesmith Society, where you can go and test, and there's a rigorous process, and like you have to make certain types of knives, and they have to stand up to, the critiques of these. I could only imagine are like these old guys who have been making knives for like 30, 40 years or something like that.
But you had no experience with knives before this, other than handling them in a kitchen.
Yeah, I like knew how to sharpen a knife on a whetstone because I worked in a couple of Japanese kitchens and with some Japanese sushi chefs, and that was about my experience with that. I was like, I know how to maintain the edge on the knife that I own.
So tell me, how did the knife company, and the knife company is called
Clench Knives.
Clench Knives.
Clench Knives.
So how did Clench Knives, when was the moment where Clench Knives was born?
It was coming up on close to a year ago, maybe, where I kind of came up with the name, and it came to me. I spent a lot of time thinking about names and researching different names, and trashed a bunch of names that I thought were cool, but sat on them for a couple of days and realized they were really corny. And clench, being an action where you clench something in your hand, and clench being something that I derived from going to the gym and learning about fighting, clench fighting, and clenching someone and being in a clinch. Like, that's kind of where the name comes from, and it just kind of stuck, because it was in tune with what I'm doing personally, with myself in martial arts, and then also it has a strong sound to it, I believe, and I thought that it stood out amongst all of the other names.
What were some of the rejected names? Do you know any off the bat?
Oh man, I can't remember. They were bad though. I think I just blocked them out of my head because they were just corny.
I like corny names.
I think one of them, the other one was like 12 knives. The
That
number
sounds
12.
cool. Sounds like some ninja shit.
It does, and I think I don't even know the reason why.
I'm gonna write this down because I'm gonna start a knife company.
I don't even
12
know.
knives.
I don't even remember why that was like in my head. I think it was because I had this plan. Whenever you're teaching yourself how to do something, and especially it being something that you've never done before, it's easy to have this grandiose idea of like what you're going to do and to be able to plan things, but you don't realize until you actually get started that plan was ridiculous. And I think
until you actually start.
Yeah. And the plan was, I was like, up until I actually got my hands on some steel and some files and some sandpaper and all the little rudimentary tools that I knew I could get together to try to do this. Up until that point, the idea was, I'm going to make 12 of these exact same kind of knives because, I would have learned something by the end of that. Maybe the first couple ones were going to be crap, and they were. Maybe the 5 through 9 would get a little bit better, and then 10, 11, and 12, maybe I would have figured it out by then. I made one of those, and then in that process, got some of the equipment together that I needed to streamline the process and kind of try to give it a professional go, and realized that the design itself was flawed, that it did, the angles of certain things wouldn't match up the way that I wanted them to, and it didn't feel right in the hand. And I still have one or two of those blanks set aside that I think maybe, in another...
You should frame it like your first dollar in a business.
Right.
Just let you know where you came from.
I think
I have my first armbar framed.
You just have a person's arm in the room.
It just lets me know how far I've come.
I think holding on to a couple of those ones, later on, whenever I figure out more about what I'm doing, that maybe I can make them work the way I envisioned them. But I think really what it boiled down to is that I was trying to make like my dream knife when I really couldn't even make a butter knife,
I mean, I'm sure there's some technical process to making butter knives.
Yeah.
I mean, we discount butter knives because they're so common, but maybe there's a whole art to butter knives.
There probably is. And I was actually joking around with one of these other guys that I talked to on the internet and about knives, and Damascus steel is a very sought after thing in knives, and I have interest in blacksmithing and forging and doing stuff like that as well, and creating the tools that I need to make.
So this is what you're doing. Forging and filing?
I'm doing forging. I'm doing some forging, and I'm doing some of what is known as stock removal. Forging, you take a given piece of steel, heat it up, hammer it out to the shape that you want, and then form a knife from that. It's a lot more in depth than that, but that's kind of the basic gist of it. And then stock removal is you get a bar of steel that's 2 inches wide by a 1/4 inch thick, and then you cut it to length and you draw the profile of your knife on that steel, and then it's a deductive process from there, and you just subtractive process, deductive.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were saying you were joking with one of your friends on the internet.
And I was explaining the difference between the two things real quick, but one day I told him, I was like, man, if I ever actually excel at this enough to where like I am doing forge welding, which is how you create Damascus patterns. It's different layers of steel welded together and then manipulated in such a way through heat and by hammer that you end up with these crazy patterns in the knives. And I was like, I just want to do Damascus flatware, like a Damascus spoon, a Damascus fork, and a Damascus
beautiful.
Butter knife. It does. Beautiful. And I thought I was being a smart ass is really what it was. And part of me felt like maybe I'm on to something. And then a couple of days later, scrolling through Instagram, I seen someone do it, and I was like, oh man, that is really beautiful. But it's obviously not an original idea, but I hadn't seen it up until that point, and I thought that it would be funny, like, oh, this guy's making these really nice flatware sets out of this crazy exotic material and stuff. But there are guys out there doing it and doing it very well.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing to see.
So you work solo? You work by yourself?
I have a partner. He is so we set up shop at my house, and he lives probably about 30 to 45 minutes away from the house. So
it's kind of in Austin, or
he lives in Austin, and I live out in Bastrop, and it's kind of a hassle for him to get out there. But he was going through some life stuff and dealing with some things, and he has to travel a lot for to take care of some family business and whatnot, and he hasn't been able to be in the shop as much as he would like to, or as I would like to see him there, because I think we have a lot of the same ideas, and I know he's mentally sort of in the same mind state that I am whenever it comes to making knives. And we got together the other day and actually talked about collaborating on some ideas and working on things together. And, we want to work independently. Like, Clench Knives is my brand, my thing, and, my vision. And then he has his own idea. And,
what's the name of his? Do you want to mention it?
I don't think he has really solidified a name as
12.
of yet.
You should give him 12.
Yeah, I'm like, bro, 12 is
12 Ninja Company.
But we were sitting around the other day and talking about, collaborative efforts and even naming that something completely different, like a project. There's I see other guys do this as well, and the crazy thing about knife making for me, and I think a lot of guys my age and getting into it now, is that we have access to YouTube videos that were made.
Yeah, did you learn anything from YouTube?
Yeah.
Did you take anything from?
Yeah, I based my entire theoretical process off of stuff that I learned from YouTube videos and talking to other guys on Instagram. Before I ever laid hand on a piece of steel and thought that I could make a knife, like, I thought that I understood it in my head,
I did the same thing with trying to wanting to do stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I didn't know any comedians. I didn't know anybody that did it. I just ordered a book off Amazon, and I read it, and I just started writing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I could do this. I know how to do this. I can teach myself how to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, I taught myself. I went to school for some graphic design, and then I dropped out pretty early, so I taught myself like the graphic design program. So, I mean, it's a fucking vital resource.
Yeah.
So you can actually learn a bunch of shit through the internet.
Well, that's the thing. I think that what I was, getting at it, for myself and other people, is that we have so much information at our fingertips. Like there's guys that I talk to, Chris Adelhart. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, man, but his company is called Pariah Knives, and he and his buddy Jim have a shop up in Pennsylvania, and that guy has willingly, and I don't know anything about him. I don't know, other than the fact that he makes awesome knives. I will
make him knives for murder.
I will send this guy a direct message on Instagram, and he responds to me with usually pretty quickly, and is willing to tell me anything he knows.
There's a lot of followers.
Yeah, and the guy makes exquisite knives, in my opinion, and any time I've ever had a question, he's been there and he's answered to the best of his ability to help me out. Same thing with Dan Altavia, I believe is how you pronounce his name. His company's called Bushkill Blades. Like, the knife community is the first community I've experienced where you're trying to learn a trade that I thought people would be harboring their techniques and their processes and whatnot, but everybody is so open and willing to share that, like, I feel like I have all the tools I need and the ability to get all of this information together and give it, give back and like give it a good, honest effort to make. At some
point, it would be ideal if people looked at you like, oh man, this guy's been in the game for a minute. He's doing something. Now you have an up and comers looking at you, and you give that back.
It's happened to me twice already recently. Instagram is such a weird thing. In one sense, I believe like it doesn't really mean anything, and in another sense, I'm like, well, it does kind of mean something because there's all these people who are actually interested in what I'm doing.
It didn't used to mean anything,
right? And I've had two people hit me up and ask me like, how do you do this or how do you do that? And I'm honest with them. I'm like, hey man, I'm super new too. I'm still learning, but this is what I've been told by these guys, and this is what I've done, and it's helped me. So take it for what you will. Don't take it as It
is a lot like jiu-jitsu.
The law. Yeah,
it is a lot.
Absolutely.
You're like you're like a blue belt.
Yes.
So that means you've been doing it for a while, and so you're not a master.
Nope.
But you're proficient.
So try to be. Thank you. Hey, you complimented me.
Thanks, man. Wait. No, thank you. You're welcome. I don't mean to get it for myself. So you're proficient enough that people are going to come to you because you have a color on your belt.
Yeah.
And ask you for advice, tips, tidbits, all that good shit.
Yeah.
Because you've been in it just long enough to know, like, oh, I know how to start running.
Right.
I'm not crawling anymore. I'm not dragging myself along. And so it's going to be the same thing, and which brings me back to the point of how jiu-jitsu has helped people because of process, because of the discipline, and it translates over. There's a
absolutely. I would have never thought to myself that I could teach myself how to do what I'm doing now with metal and with knives and learning some of these aspects of blacksmithing and forging stuff if I didn't have that structure that I got from doing jiu-jitsu and knowing that if I stick with something long enough, even if it's really frustrating and I have no idea what I'm doing and I fail miserably for months and months at a time, I know that because of my experience with jiu-jitsu that if I stick with it and just keep trying, I'll figure it out, man.
You're going to figure it out.
I'll figure it out.
All right. Yeah. What are your goals?
My goals for this next year
for the knife company for Clench Knives.
For Clench Knives is to just make as honest of a product as I can to the best of my ability. Try to get my name out there a little bit more and just make the best knife that I possibly know how to make and not get caught up. My biggest thing recently is not getting caught up on the things that I can't do, but to focus on the things that I can do.
Sounds like some Al-Anon shit. But I'm down with it.
Sort of my focus right now, because that's where I'm at. It's not about what I can't do. It's about what I can do and how well I can do it.
Fucking science.
Boom.
That's all we got. I'm thinking. Why don't you give a shout out, man? You want to say what's up to anybody? You want to plug your product?
Yeah, I mean, follow me at Clench Knives on Instagram. Check out what I'm doing there. I show as much as I possibly can, mistakes, victories. I'm addicted to fishing, so every now and then you see a little bit of fishing photos and whatnot in there.
We were going to talk about that. We have a couple of minutes. We can talk about
whatever,
that.
Yeah, whatever.
you moved recently,
Uh-huh.
and we'll get into this super quickly, but you moved recently from Austin to Bastrop,
Correct.
and now you are kind of a farmer.
Sort of like my girlfriend has been living at the spot, before I moved in there, and she had basically a little farmstead going. She has chickens and ducks and rabbits, and we grow some vegetables out there. And then my another roommate that we have, she has horses out there. So I basically, if you go to my house and you didn't know any better, you're like, man, I'm on a farm. It literally looks, smells, feels like a farm.
So you're on a farm.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing. And, my girlfriend, Susanna, and my roommate, Elise, what's up, guys? If you guys hear this, hi. They're both really, really in tune with nature and are able to grow things, and are both focus hugely on sustainability. And we don't even have recycling programs in Bastrop to my knowledge, but we still separate all of our stuff, and I drive it into Austin and I recycle all of my stuff that way. And sustainability has become a big thing in my mind and in my life because of those two. And I've even talked to shout out Rob's Wildwood on Instagram, one of the sources where I get some of my handle material from for my knives. And I've kind of been after him to source me native Texas materials, like native pecan, native
for handles and stuff.
Yeah,
that's dope.
I'm trying to, and I know I'm not the only one. I talked to shout out Chris from Humble Blades. I met with this guy the other day randomly. I hit him up on Instagram, and he was just like, "Come to my shop, let's talk. I like meeting new makers." And I know he is also adamant about trying to source as much of his stuff as he possibly can from Texas.
That's cool.
That was not a thing where I was from in Louisiana. Nobody really gave a care about anything like that, but it's really cool to be
care about murder.
Yeah.
It's really about cool that no limit soldier.
It's really cool to be involved in something like that where there's a lot of local pride that goes into
Texans have a lot have
Yeah, for
sure.
Yeah.
They're if you're from Texas, everybody knows you're from Texas.
Everybody knows for
just
sure.
To let you know.
Yeah. That's a huge thing in my life now. And it's like, being sustainable, I'm sure there's other ways that as I get into this, I'll be able to figure out how to be more sustainable. Like I want to eventually get into making my own leather sheaths and stuff for the knives that I make. It goes hand in hand. Everyone else is doing it. Why shouldn't I? I don't want to have to pay someone else to do it. And, I don't want to contribute to the mass slaughter of farm raised animals if it's unnecessary. Like Susanna brought this up in a conversation yesterday. Like it would be really rad if we could figure out how to find a farmer that I could source leather from locally, whether it be cow hides, deer hides, whatever it may be, whatever I may use, and make that something a local product as well.
Yep.
It's going to take some research.
Absolutely, man. We're growing.
That's where I'm at with that. And the whole fishing thing, we have 2 ponds on the property where we live, and I had overlooked it for the better part of a year, but 2 months ago I went out and grabbed the fishing pole and started catching fish, and I was like, whoa, this is fun.
You catch and release, or you like
yeah.
I don't
want
to talk about it.
I ate a couple of them just because
because
they looked good, and they tasted great. But
they
for the most part, catch and release, it's a sport thing for me, and learning how to do it and learning all the different little lures and knots and techniques and stuff. It's like I feel mildly prepared that if I was in a life or death situation, if I had
got that fishing pole, teach a man how to fish,
fishing equipment on me, I could survive as long as there's fish in the water. And there's that.
It's not radiated. All right, that is all we have. Okay, give a shout out if you haven't given them.
Clench Knives is my thing. I'd like to give a shout out to all the dudes on Instagram that have given me advice and helped me in any kind of way. Mark Liss up in Canada, his thing is Origin Handcrafted on Instagram. Chris Autohart, Pariah Knives on Instagram. Dan Altavia, Bushkill Blades on Instagram. Edward Braun. He goes by Aleph Forge on Instagram. I could possibly write all those down and see if we can't figure out if there's
we can post them, guys. We'll put a link.
Post
we'll
them
put a link
somewhere.
up for sure.
All those guys. Shout out to you, Derrick. Thank you for everything that you've taught me with jiu-jitsu. Shout out,
absolutely, man.
Toby Imada and his stubborn ass. I'm sure we'll get him on here someday. I want to be there if that ever happens.
Trying to make that happen. Trying to bring you the entertainment, guys.
Shout out my mom and dad. They raised me. I guess that's about it, really.
The parentals of Jeremy Landry. Thank you guys for tuning in to another edition. You're going to want to follow us on, what do you want to follow us on? You want to go to thelightofdarkness.com. That's actually as it's spelled, thelightofdarkness.com. Follow us on iTunes. You can find us on YouTube. Subscribe to all those things. We do have them up in the, and I guess the links or whatever. It's going to be at the end of this video, at the end of the audio. Subscribe. We're just trying to bring you some entertainment and, just do something cool. And hopefully you guys enjoy this shit. You can also hit me up, Derrick, at thelightofdarkness.com if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, or if you want to be a guest. That's all I have. Thank you, guys. Shout out to all of the EAE and everybody listening. You guys are fucking awesome. I've gotten good response. I love you guys. That's all we got. Again, for the last time.
Peace.
Okay. Bye.